Live with the Energy Question with David Blackmon. I'm your host, David Blackmon, and we are here talking politics on our weekly political podcast with Larry Schweikart, America's history teacher and author of a series of best-selling books, including A Patriot's History of Globalism, which is a terrific new book that I guess it's your most recent book, right, Larry?
It is. I'm currently working on one called America in the 21st Century that will be out sometime next year.
Oh boy. Yeah. I'll look forward to that. So just so everyone knows before we get started, I'm going to be gone for the next 2 Mondays. Larry will be gone next Monday, so there will be no podcast. And Stu and Larry will pick it up 2 weeks from today. And then I'll be back the next time. And hopefully won't be off on any more vacations before the end of the year. Anyway, let's get started. It's going to be a fascinating week in Chicago, of course. But before we get to the Democratic National Convention, let's talk about a report Larry sent over this morning. House Republican report, Biden engaged in impeachable conduct. I guess it's about time the Republicans released a report on their long-running impeachment investigation. What's going to come of that, Larry?
Not a darn thing. We could label this. This goes into the Trey Gowdy file, which is make a lot of noise, do a little dance, get down tonight, and don't do anything.
Yeah. Do you think the Republicans understand that tactics like this, where they make all this noise with an investigation, then they go on vacation for 5 weeks, 1st of August, and quietly release this report in the midst of that 5-week vacation, with everyone knowing they're not going to do a damn thing about it when they return because it's too late? Do you think they understand that is, really has a lot to do with what has led them to become the most detested political faction in Washington, D.C. among the public?
Yeah, I don't know. 2 years ago, just before the 2022 races, the election, we had a small event, maybe 20 people, with my Congressman Andy Biggs. And I knew he was going to win his reelection. And I was pretty sure that the Republicans were going to win. I thought they'd get an extra 20 seats or so, but I knew they were going to win the House. And I said, Congressman, you understand that you're only going to have two powers because the Senate is not going to help you out at all. You can either shut down government or you can impeach, in which case the Senate will not convict. I said, so are you ready to shut down government? And he kind of looked at me and then he dodged and he said, well, we have some very important other powers, including investigation, where we can get this out to the public. Well, that's true. The chairmen are very powerful. They can block bills, which they've done very well. And the public doesn't hear a lot about that. But in the end, the only two things that they have left at their disposal are impeachment and shutting down the government if you don't have the Senate. And they're unwilling to do either of those. So even if they were to impeach Biden, it would go nowhere. I think probably they are in their caucus greatly concerned that if they actually do an impeachment vote, A, it would look like piling on because he's not the nominee anymore. And B, it's going nowhere in the Senate. So it's just, quote, a political trick. So I understand their political thinking, but it's exactly this kind of stuff that leads people to say, I'm not interested in voting for these guys. And it's why Trump has a 5 or 6 point lead on average over almost every Senate candidate out there.
Yeah. And it's really threatening to cost them a pickup of the Senate majority in November. I still think they'll get there, but it's going to be really tight. And it's because of this kind of thing. They're so ineffectual when they're in the majority.
Back in 2017, I wrote a piece called The Suicide of the House is Complete. And basically, I argued that maybe it was 2019, but at any rate, it was that once Pelosi engaged in her impeachment, that once and for all made the House almost totally irrelevant. Yeah. It does still have the power of the purse a little bit, but to the extent that it won't use that outside of the Senate and say, we're going to shut down the government till you come to our side, the House has become it's interesting in America, our House of Representatives or House of Commons has become what the House of Lords is in England, which is kind of, decorative.
Yeah. And it's largely because they don't do budget bills anymore. Back when they actually did budget bills, the 12 appropriation bills that make up a federal budget, which they stopped doing 20 years ago when Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi decided it wasn't good politics for the Democrats. Since then, they no longer have the power to influence the behavior of these appointed political appointees by threatening to withhold their budget dollars. Everything's done on a CR now. And so they have no real oversight authority anymore. And they don't seem especially interested, as far as I can tell, in regaining that.
It's a very bloody fight that will have to take place to get back to that point where the House has real power. And there's only been a few individuals, not even groups of people, but a few individuals like Ted Cruz or Newt Gingrich or a couple of others over the last 30, 40 years who've been willing to say we need to shut down the government until we restore this balance.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I love Ted Cruz.
Huh?
I love Ted Cruz.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. He takes a lot of unfair criticism. He really does a tremendous job for Texas in the U.S. Senate. And I wish we could say that about every member of the Texas delegation. But we can't. Okay, so enough of that. Before I get myself in trouble, let's talk about what's going on in Chicago this week, where supposedly about 120,000 Antifa / pro-Hamas protesters have gathered there. It's part of 51 different factions of the Democrat-funded protest movement. And they're apparently there to cause havoc with the Democratic National Committee. Make sense of this, somebody.
I'll tell you what, I just want to say that I want to give a shout out to some of the folks that are doing the geofencing and the actual targeting of the cell phone data. We know who those people are.
Yeah.
And those people have been, by definition of them, by you saying that number out there, there's one article out here saying there's 88,000 of them have been to 3 George Floyd riots or more, or Antifa. So these are not nice guys. These are guys that I would want to walk around and make sure I had body armor on. And they already have bricks. And Larry and I, before the show were started, Larry, we were laughing that they got bricks as gift bags instead of cookies. They've got dog crap and stuff they hand out for riots to throw at the police. And this is the same group that defunds the police? I don't get it.
Well, it's important to understand that in 1968, when the violence got really out of control, there were only 11,000 protesters, and there were about 9,000 police, Secret Service, and FBI agents in Chicago. Well, so now the police are going to be outnumbered at least 10-1. And I can't wait for those Palestinian protesters to start scaling those walls in mass, sort of that scene out of World War Z, where all the zombies are climbing up over the wall. I'm waiting for that.
Wow. Yeah, that could happen. I mean, the TV reports keep talking about, the protesters are going to be segregated half a mile away from the arena. I mean, these people are like cockroaches. They find a way through these police barricades during these riot episodes. And so the question just becomes what their purpose of being there really is. Are they there just to make noise, which they will no doubt do? Or are they there to actually riot and cause a lot of destruction? And if they are, then without calling in the National Guard, I'm not sure the Chicago Police Department, with more than 2,000 officers already having called in sick as of yesterday for this week, really have the resources anymore to contain a group that big. This is a really explosive situation if the rioters want it to be. And
Well, and that's the question: is
I'm
what is the
actually,
purpose? What is the purpose
yeah,
of this
yeah,
demonstration? Because if they are just going to stay where they are put, the media will not cover them, and they will have no voice.
yes,
And I think they understand that the only way they get a voice is to break through those police lines and go after the delegates at the DNC to get inside the convention. And so we're going to find out real quick what their marching orders are, because if they stay put, then they are irrelevant.
yeah. That's true. And and again, just to go back to what I said initially, these are all groups that were created by interests that support the Democratic Party, the Open Society movement, all these George Soros funded organizations. Those NGOs that are affiliated with the Democratic Party fund these movements and have funded every protest movement in this country since the Occupy Wall Street protests began during the tail end of the Bush. Really, even the anti-Iraq and Afghanistan protests were part of this NGO funded kind of
Code Pink.
astroturfing movement. Code Pink.
Code
Yeah.
Pink.
And it's all astroturfing. None of this is organic. None of it's true grassroots movement. It's all astroturf created by these NGOs and funded by them. So it's really a rather interesting development here, or it will be if they do try to bust through those police barricades. It's really an explosive situation in a city that's not known for its civil behavior to begin with. And adequate policing, and they put such limits. Also, the other thing is when Richard Daley in 1968 was mayor in Chicago, they were allowed to use tear gas and batons and just any containment tool they had available to them. Chicago police are no longer allowed to use those methods of crowd control. Thanks again, due to policies enacted by Democratic politicians. So if there is a major really an explosive situation in a city that's just all lies at the feet of the Democratic Party.
David, I'm just bringing this up. This is Tony Seguro. He is the one. He now says there is 104, 889
yeah,
of geo-fenced mobile devices that are there. These are not nice people. And the video that he's got there, they're already started off to what you guys were talking about.
Yeah.
Well, you know what was interesting, again, from a historian's perspective? In 1968, you had 2 or 3 people, Jerry Rubin, Abby Hoffman, the kind of Democrat clique from Michigan, that were clearly in charge of what was going on, the Chicago 7, right? And with this movement, so far, no real leader has come out where you can say, watch what this guy's saying or watch what this guy's doing, because that will give you an indication of what the whole movement is about. Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin said in no uncertain terms, and we quote them in A Patriot's History of the United States, that whether it was student takeovers or protests, their goal was never demands. Whatever demands they had were irrelevant. He says, you answer our first set of demands, we're going to give you 10 more.
Right.
Because it's not about demands, it's about breaking the system. Well, what is this group about? Is it about breaking the system, starting with the Democrats? Because those are the guys they have to break. They're the ones who aren't responding to their pleas. Or is it about just collecting a paycheck? Because we know many of these people are actually on Soros's payroll. They actually get money for showing up. Here in Arizona, they had a Harris rally in which they put an ad in the paper asking for 500 paid actors to carry signs. So there you go.
Yeah, and they're paying them. I mean, they're paying people to show up at these Harris rallies. It's how the Democrats have operated for 50 years, and people still don't really understand that. What do you think, if anything, all of this will mean for the conduct of the convention itself? For example, Biden's supposed to speak tonight. Hillary Clinton, I guess, has now been put on the agenda for tonight as well, so they're getting rid of the dead wood first. Do you think we'll ever hear from Joe Biden after tonight? I mean, will we ever hear from him or see him again?
Only in a courtroom.
Yeah.
Only if somebody brings him into court. But he's finished as any kind of political player. It's, I wanted him to be soundly defeated by Trump for revenge. But
yeah, me too.
Actually, did you ever watch a series called The Shield?
I saw a few episodes of it. Yeah.
Well, The Shield is, I think, one of the best series ever done. And it featured a kind of rogue cop named Vic Mackey, played by Michael Chiklis.
Yeah,
and
Chiklis,
they just got into one problem after another by doing a little bit illegal, until by the end they were in horrendous problems. And he ended up, one guy committed suicide. They killed another guy of their four. The third guy, Vic Mackey, handed him over rather than himself go to jail and made a plea deal. And the final scene is one of the greatest in all of series history, because after he's done all this, Vic Mackey is given a stack from ICE, and he's told to go through these folders. And they said, you don't need your gun. And they took away his gun. And he's sitting there looking at a stack of folders at night. And in the background, you hear all the police sirens. In other words, he's been denied his chance at action ever again. He's stuck doing nothing. And I think that's the way Biden's going to be, is the punishment that's been meted on him is that he's going to be stuck doing nothing for the rest of his life.
Yeah. Well, and they've already executed a coup on him. I mean, he's essentially irrelevant anyway. I had to laugh. I laughed out loud this morning. Politico has a story, and the tweet that they put out about it says, Democrats arrive in Chicago as a party lacking drama. This is a party that literally just executed a coup d'etat on a sitting president 3 weeks ago and created the atmosphere for an attempted assassination of their political rival 4 weeks ago. But they're the party lacking drama as they arrive in Chicago. I mean, it's
just let the Palestinians go and we'll have some drama.
And as we just showed a second ago, they're handing bags. That one clip that we just showed, when you take a look at this, those are very well-made signs that are pre-done. Those are expensive.
Open Society pays for all of that. Yeah.
Thank you, George Soros and young Soros. Good grief.
And you're not showing the piles of bricks and other weapons that mysteriously just appear and get left in big
Larry was
ashes.
taken off of X, and we don't need you taken off of X.
But it's all very well organized. I mean, people think this stuff just happens organically, and literally none of it does. None of it is organic. None of it's grassroots. And it hasn't been for a long, long time. Anyway.
Well, it was Maureen Dowd today in the New York Slimes who actually said that she used the coup word and said that Biden was removed with a coup. I think that's important coming from the Slimes.
I want to bring this one video in here real quick.
I'm going to be stuck doing nothing for the rest of his life.
Sound off. This is from Tony just a few minutes ago, 10 hours ago, saying that the convention security concerns. CBS is reporting that the defense funded decontamination rooms at Chicago to prepare for bioweapons. Now, is that going to be a false flag or try to get out of having a conference?
Well,
bioweapons. I would think that is probably a fairly routine thing at a big convention like this.
Yeah, remember, what are they after, supposedly? You go back to the demonstrators in 68. They're after the cameras. They're after attention. They're after being able to say to the world, the Democrats don't like Palestine. The Democrats are supporting Israel. And bio scares don't do anything. You see pictures of a bunch of people walking out of buildings or people being decontaminated. That doesn't do a lot. What you want to see is the World War Z scene of all these people standing on top of each other's shoulders, crawling over these walls as the police, like the defenders of the Alamo, are battling them back, knocking them off, but losing ground because they're overwhelmed by the number. That's what they want to see.
Well, I mean, yeah, the visuals are everything at these kinds of events. If you don't have the visuals, you're really not making much of a difference, because that's all TV cares about. And you wonder, the other thing I wonder, frankly, is that other than Fox News and Newsmax, what TV cameras would even show that? Because the rest of the media is so in the bag for the Democrats. Even if you had scenes like that happening outside the convention center, I'm not sure ABC or CBS would even bother to go out there and put a camera on it.
You can imagine ABC, CBS at the Alamo, and their cameras are all turned around back on Santa Anna's Army, just marching nice and peacefully while the walls are this incredible carnage, right?
You just wouldn't
mostly
see
peaceful protest.
Yeah, mostly peaceful. Yeah, and of course that's the other thing, is if these rioters start burning stuff, are we going to see those scenes too? If they turn this into another George Floyd summer kind of thing?
Well, the Chicago businesses have already been told to board up and leave for the week, and so isn't that amazing that the Republicans had a convention in Milwaukee? There was no riot. There was nothing boarded up. There was nobody who lost money. In fact, they made a lot of money off the Republicans. But these guys are going to have to board up because they can't keep their peeps in line.
Yeah.
And Trump's hotel is right across from all the whole shindig. So they got to sit there and look at a big Trump sign through the whole mess.
Yeah. That's an impressive building, by the way, in Chicago. It kind of dominates the center city skyline. It's really a pretty cool place. And all that just brings me to, what was I going to talk about here? Oh, so the visuals being so important and making the difference in the media. I saw a story today, and I sent it over to you guys, about ad revenue being down 41% for the 3 network late night talk shows year over year. And I wonder what to make of that in terms of the current political situation, because they all went completely into the anti-Trump tank during the first Trump presidency, intentionally, and intentionally stopped being funny in favor of delivering political messages. And it's like every night they're interviewing some talking head from CNN or whatever. I just wonder what to make of the fact that advertisers are no longer wanting to advertise on those shows with this tight race between Trump and Harris. What does that say about what's happening in society at large?
Well, in addition to the political component that half of America doesn't want to see that, you have a demographic component, which is that the people who used to watch late night TV, comedy or whatnot. I mean, I remember growing up that Johnny Carson was it. You had to tune in and see Carson, right?
Yeah, he was
But
hilarious.
today, the Utes, as my cousin Vinny would say, the Utes aren't interested in that at all. It's interesting to watch the internet and social media segregation, because if you're of the oldest generation that can use the internet, you're on Facebook. If you're on the next generation, you're on Twitter. If you're the next generation below that, you're on Instagram. And if you're on the generation below that, you're on TikTok.
I mean, Moses and I are buddies, and I'm on X, and I've banned my company from using Facebook. So where does that make me? Mentally 12?
Well, the other thing I wonder is, if Trump gets elected, let's say Trump wins the election in November, and these guys suddenly have Trump to talk about every day, day in and day out, does that save them? And I don't think it does, because they already have him to talk about every day.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's part of a larger demographic problem they have, that their structure is not aimed at younger people, and they're just not interested. It's like the morning news shows on Sunday morning. Who watches that? Who's under 40? Nobody watches that
Hell, I've
stuff.
quit watching them. You know,
I did too.
I can't stand it.
Yeah, so these are major changes, and you're seeing it really affecting Hollywood right now. You know, Disney, for example, had 3 hits in the last 2 years, and one was Inside Out 1, one was Inside Out 2, and the other was Deadpool Wolverine. And Deadpool Wolverine may be pretty vulgar, but it's just one after another assault on the history of what has happened in Disney over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, they're absolutely destroying Disney within the movie. And you're seeing that none of these woke movies now can make money at all. None of the woke series can make money at all. And they act like they're shocked and amazed when somebody puts out a series that isn't woke and that's makes all sorts of money.
It's like Mark Hamill being a guest at the DNC, who has actually turned out to be one of the biggest disappointments. You know, he went from way cool in 1977 to holy smokes, Batman, you are insignificant. Go away, little man.
Yeah, he's a tiny little man. He's a really...
Well, there is word out, and it's yet to be validated, but it comes from fairly reliable sources, that at Lucasville, they are going to essentially completely pivot away from what's happened in the Star Wars movies and canon ever since the start of the 3rd trilogy, and that they're going to basically do a total reboot along the lines of the first 6 movies.
Nice.
Which would be huge. Now, very quietly out there, they fired, not in Lucas, but in Marvel, they fired all of the activist directors and producers.
Yeah.
So there's something going on out there, to quote Buffalo Springfield. There's something going on out here. Yeah. What it is ain't exactly clear, right?
The other thing that's happening in pop culture, and I like to take a look at what's happening with stand-up comics, because they're always a leading indicator of what's happening in society. And over the last 6 months, what has happened among the stand-up comedy industry is that woke comics can't get big gigs anymore. Nobody wants them to play a stadium show or, you know, really even in the comedy clubs. It's all these comics that are now making fun of wokeness that are getting all the big gigs. And so that just tells you where society's, Chappelle, and it's just Seinfeld is becoming big again all of a sudden. The guy that Bill, what's his name, that Saturday Night Live fires from the cast 3 years ago, and then 6 months ago brings him back as a host of one of his programs because he's gotten so huge, right? And they fired him from the cast 3 years ago because he wasn't woke. So, so even Saturday Night Live is suddenly realizing they're completely out of step with the times. So, I think that's a positive. That can only be a positive indicator for society.
Correct.
So back to politics, as if we haven't been talking about that all along. What do you guys think the state of the presidential race really is? I mean, posters have been, and the media have been trying to make it seem as if Kamala Harris has some significant lead over Trump in the polling data. But then we had this rash of polls this past week came out showing Trump with small leads. And I'm just kind of lost at where this thing really stands. To me, it seems like it's just basically a neck and neck race.
Well, I would urge people to consider you've got 2 tracks. One is the polling track.
Yeah.
And the polling track is easily manipulatable, if that's a word.
It is.
Because you can, number one, it reflects a natural bias in response, what's called the response bias, which is if one group seems hotter or something's happened, like with the nomination of Harris, then white women, college educated, and liberals are much more likely to answer the phone and talk about it than are conservatives. No matter how you weight it, Barris says it's almost impossible to wait for response bias. The other thing that's happening is that several of the polls have just gone back to their 2016 ways of heavily, and I know Rich doesn't like me to use this word, but of heavily oversampling Democrats. He has a different word for it, but it basically comes down in your final model, you have more Democrats involved than would be involved in a normal electorate. That's one track, and that's showing Harris either tied, up by 2, or down by 2. And I don't think it's that close, but that's what they're showing.
Right.
But the other track that very few people are paying attention to is the voter registration data, which across the board is overwhelming for Republicans. And what's so significant is it doesn't matter if you're talking about California or Maine or Ohio or Florida or Iowa or Arizona or Nevada or Pennsylvania, wherever you can track it, it's only going one way. It's only how fast is it going one way in some of these states. Now, I just looked at our data in Maricopa County here. They literally update the data daily. And so as of Friday, I haven't looked today, Republicans just in Maricopa County are up over Democrats 160,000. Now, that number for the whole state in 2020 was 130,000.
Wow.
Right now, Republicans are up almost 260,000 statewide, 250,000 for a state that Trump lost by 11,000 votes, of which, if they were legit, most or half those votes have already switched back to Trump this time around. So you look at California. California is trending for the first time in years Republican. And when you consider how many people have fled that state, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, because most of the people leaving aren't Democrats. They're mostly Republicans.
No. And Pennsylvania, which prior to Trump's win in 2016 was around, I think, 600,000 a Democrat advantage. Now it's less than 150,000. North Carolina has been cut in half. And each of these, when I get these reports, they're moving to the Republicans. Every single report, every single day from every single site you can look at. So what that says to me is that whatever the polls are polling, they're not polling enough Republicans, not even close. And so when you do that, you're not just going to address the Democrat +6. You're going to say, well, wait a minute. Actually, now it's moved to Republican +1, so we're going to be off by 7.
Yeah. I saw one poll got released last week that had the sample was D plus 21 in the sample. And of course, they claim, well, but we have these weighting factors that we applied to it after. Well, that, I mean, come on. It's just ridiculous to even publish a poll like that. And their whole sample was like 900 likely voters. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything when you see a poll like that. Stu, I'm sorry.
I saw a great thing from Alex Jones, who used to be, I thought, was a nut job, but now he's been right so much.
He's the voice of reason.
Yes,
yeah, exactly. That's what he's morphed into. Yeah,
and his young co-host, who I can't remember his name right now, was bringing up path to Trump's 270 is actually through Nevada, and I thought that was pretty interesting. Is that everybody's focused on Pennsylvania, and Scott Pressler out there is really making a great job out there. But the weight on Nevada was really the path to 270. And that to me, when you talk about patterns, is encouraging that there's enough people waking up to the theft that I think we may have the ability to get to that 100 million vote that they're going to have a hard time cheating.
Well, Nevada is one of these states that's consistently over the last several years had more Republican registrations than Democrats. And part of the reason for a lot of this weighting is Hispanics. The Hispanic vote in Nevada, according to Barris, is not quite 50-50, but it's almost there, which is a clear win for any Republican.
Right.
And now Trump, with his no tax on tips that Harris stole, and his crypto endorsement, because they have these big crypto meetings out there every year. I think if Trump wins Nevada, he'll win Arizona by 4 or 5.
Sure. Yeah.
If he wins Pennsylvania, he'll win Arizona by 4 or 5. So I think right now that it was J.D. Vance this morning that said he thought that Harris's polling had stagnated. And I don't think he's saying that based on the news. I think he's saying that based on what Tony Fabrizio told him in an internal memo.
Yeah. I mean, Barris does see the internals pretty regularly. You can't always talk about them explicitly, but he does make some implications from them. And I actually had a memo last week from a fellow who said he had seen them too, who probably did because he's in the business. And he said that basically Harris's data is showing not much change really in 3 weeks. And it's essentially the same race as it was when Biden quit. So we'll see after the convention. Obviously, normally out of a party's convention, there is a polling bump of some magnitude or another, right?
I'm sorry for laughing.
And of course the media will portray, regardless of how Kamala delivers her speech, the media is going to portray it as the greatest speech ever delivered in the history of American politics. And so I just, but I have to say, I don't expect her to get much, if any, polling bump. We'll have to wait 3 weeks afterwards to know, because it always takes that long for it to work its way through the system. But I really don't think she's going to get much of any polling increase out of this thing. I think whatever increase she was going to receive, she's probably already gotten. I wonder what y'all think about that.
In my talks to groups, I gave a talk to a big GOP group Saturday, and I say, buckle up, prepare for 2 to 3 more weeks of Harris news. Harris is up. Looking good for Harris. And prepare for about 2 to 3 more weeks of that from the hoax news media. They've got to do something, and then it's going to start fading. And I don't think they will ever get back to where they're showing the real numbers of Trump up 5 or 6. Or now he was never up 10 in Pennsylvania. I'm sorry, Rasmussen. He was never up 10 there, but he may be up 2 on a fairly regular basis. But, we'll see. Somebody that all of your viewers ought to follow on Substack is Seth Keshel, Keshel. He goes by Captain K's Corner, Seth Keshel. And he does a lot of voter analysis, registration analysis, and so he's somebody to follow on all this stuff.
I'm going to have to remember that. I don't think I'm following him. Stu, what do you think?
I personally think Obama is upset at Kamala, and that they wish they had somebody in there. Larry has convinced me that they may not be able to take her out, but I know he wants to take her out. He hadn't called me yet and let me know that. But if he could have somebody other than Kamala there, I think they would try to flip her out.
So you don't think Michelle Obama, when she speaks Wednesday, is going to declare herself the nominee?
It would not surprise me that if it would not put it past, I would not put it past the CIA to try to do something to remove Kamala, like something bad. It wouldn't surprise me. Nothing surprises.
Well, nothing would surprise me. That, I've gotten kind of immune to being surprised about anything in the U.S., just society in general, but politics especially.
I still don't think Kamala will be on the ticket. I think
we only have a few days left because North Carolina votes. They start voting on September, 3rd or 6th, so and the ballots have to be sent out already. So I don't know how they're going to put another name on a ballot that's already been sent out.
The only way to do that, I believe, by their by rules, is by person leaving because of health reasons or death.
Yeah, but because the bylaws say they can do that, that doesn't mean election officials in any of these states have to accommodate them. The states have their own laws.
David, it's the counties. The counties print the ballots,
right?
So you're looking at thousands and thousands of counties, and they don't care who's up there. They're going with what they got because they're bureaucrats, by God, and they've got a schedule to keep. I should say they're bureaucrats, and they've got a schedule to be late for.
How funny.
Do you think that Obama and other real leaders in the party are regretting scheduling this year's convention so late in the cycle. I mean, this is about the latest I've ever seen a party convention take place. They'd have been a lot better off if they'd had it sooner, I think, early in August, maybe first week.
If they'd had it too much earlier, Biden would be the nominee.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And
It
then
did
they'd
give
be
them the
stuck.
chance to get rid of Biden.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway. So the other question I wanted to just bring up today is about JD Vance. JD got slandered and smeared by the media, of course, when in the week or two after the Republican convention, after he became the nominee, which of course is what the Democrats and the media were going to do to any nominee Trump chose. And he had a pretty rough couple of weeks, but it seems to me he's actually turning into a real asset to the campaign now. And he's given a series of major interviews with these network people that it really have not gone well for the hosts of those shows.
Right.
So I just wonder if you agree. I think Vance is actually as I expected he would be, turned out to be a pretty excellent pick to be the running mate.
Yes, he's adopted that Vivek Ramaswamy flip.
Yeah.
This is a wrestling move, and you immediately flip it against the host. And why are you talking about something I said 3 years ago rather than this about Harris, that about Harris, this about Harris? And they're going to have trouble with him because A, he believes what he says. B, he has a life story that, I didn't grow up, but I taught for 30 years, just 10, 15 miles outside of Middleton, Ohio, where he wrote about in Hillbilly Elegy. Yeah, and I had to drive through that many times to go interview various people. I wrote a book, a biography about Reagan's Secretary of Commerce, Bill Verity, who wanted his biography written. And I would go through there to interview him. David, this is a story you'll really like since you guys are talking about Obama so much. Bill and Peggy Verity, when he became Commerce Secretary, he replaced Malcolm Baldrige, who died when a horse fell on him. Yeah. And Verity was no spring chicken. But anyway, they took over. And after Reagan was out of office, I think it was 1992 or so, they had the 100th anniversary of the Commerce Department. And Verity had to be there and walk through the receiving line. And Clinton was at the front of that receiving line. And so Bill's wife, Peggy, hated Clinton. She just thought he was a hound dog and was just terrible. And she had a full speech prepared to deliver to Bill Clinton when she got to the top of that front of that receiving line, right? So they go through and Peggy gets up to Clinton and he takes her hand in both his hands. He goes, "Hi, I'm Bill Clinton. Hey, you're a real cutie there. Hey, how you doing?" And she said, "Hi, Mr. President. How are you?" And she walked away and Bill said, "Why did you do that?" She said, "I don't know. He just came over me." And so Clinton had that personal appeal. It was just really remarkable.
Yes. In fact, I have a story about that too. We got a bill passed during the middle of the Clinton administration and went to Jackson Hole for the signing ceremony. A bunch of oil and gas guys, a bunch of old oil and gas guys and ladies were in the room with Bill Clinton and everybody hated him. No, nobody could stand Clinton. He walks in and he owned the room for an hour. I mean, he owned the room. And afterwards, one of these old oil men from Montana was talking to a couple of us. He says, "I hate that guy's guts, but for an hour, I was a Bill Clinton Republican." Yeah. He just, Clinton did have. It's just undeniable. He had that effect on people. And that brings the last thing I want to bring up here. Chris Coons has become one of the spokesmen. He's the Connecticut senator, or what? Delaware senator. Chris Coons is one of the spokespeople for Kamala Harris campaign, excuse me, and was on a show yesterday, and he made the statement that Joe Biden has passed more consequential legislation than any other president. And I immediately thought, this guy's old enough to remember Ronald Reagan. He's old enough to remember the Bill Clinton administration. where all these major consequential pieces of legislation were put in place. And all Biden's gotten through, as far as I can tell, is the infrastructure law that didn't really fund a lot of infrastructure, and the Inflation Reduction Act, which had the impact of creating massive inflation. I
Right.
mean, how do people justify saying that about Joe Biden?
Well, remember, magnitude of accomplishment doesn't mean goodness of accomplishment.
Yeah.
Hitler had a whole lot of measures too. I mean,
Yes,
he passed more
exactly.
measures than any previous German president.
Yeah.
Problem was that people died with every one of them. So, I would tell Coons, I would just come back and say that, just activity does not equal excellence.
No, it doesn't. And the consequences for the country of some of these bills those two major pieces of legislation, the total price tag, $3.3 trillion. And most of it is pork barrel spending on energy related projects that are simply not viable and are now in the process of creating dozens and probably ultimately hundreds of corporate bankruptcies that are killing a lot of jobs. And so, yeah, I mean, it's consequential for sure. He didn't say positively consequential, so I guess we can give him that.
Well, I like when people like Don Lemon, or as I call him, Blind Lemon Don, when they go out into the street and begin interviewing
Oh,
people.
that was prescient.
And it always backfires because ordinary
Yeah.
people say, no, I'm hurting. It's I can't explain how they get the numbers they get. I don't know. I've been around economists enough in my life to know that they can torture the statistics until they scream whatever answer you want.
Yeah.
But I do know that ordinary people are having trouble making ends meet. That I would go to Walmart every 2 weeks with my wife under Trump, and our biweekly shopping would come to between $350 and $400, and without exception, same amount of stuff every time we go. This time it's $550 to $600.
Yeah.
So it's almost doubled. And it doesn't, go to McDonald's, it's $12 for a cheeseburger, fries, and a drink. That's just outrageous.
No, it's crazy. And people are having a hard time making ends meet because the real inflation in groceries has been at least 50% over the last 3 years, and probably more like 70 to 80%. I do all the grocery shopping in my household, and I can tell you that for the staples like bread, eggs, milk, sugar, those things have all doubled in price. I mean, they're
Dave,
just
how much of
basically
that
twice what you were paying.
How much of that is energy related? How much of the price
Very
of
little.
a food is related to energy?
I disagree, David.
Well, look, so I mean, there has been a price increase in gas and diesel, so the transportation factor does factor in. But if you're talking a doubling in price, transportation is at most 10% of the cost of
What about packaging?
You've also got a lot
packaging
of
too.
other. You've got packaging. You've got fertilizer costs have shot through the roof.
Yes.
All the farmers that I've been talking to, average energy prices under Biden, have been same guy, have gone up 35 to 40% when you take a look at electricity. You have farmers have to have milk. So your milk, the dairy farms are getting slaughtered by their electricity costs.
Absolutely.
So it's not just a gas and diesel. So when you sit
Yeah.
back and think about it, I think energy costs are the number one thing. And that was one of the best things that I heard President Trump just come out with. Says we've got to lower our energy costs first in order to tackle inflation. And I applaud that. That if you don't lower it doesn't matter what finances you do. If you don't lower your energy costs, you don't stand a chance on reducing inflation.
And moreover, that affects everybody across the economic spectrum. So it affects poor people just as much as it does rich people. Poor people are buying food. Poor people are trying to get to work with high price gas. Poor people are paying for higher costs in all of their packaging for anything they buy. And you've got a list of about 1 million things Trump needs to do first when he's in office. I don't know which one would be first, but one of the first would be to repeal every single energy regulation Biden's administration put out there and lower the cost of energy. And you do that, and the economy will immediately surge to life.
Oh yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, for in that regard, regulations can be pretty hard to rescind. They take a lot of time, and the part of it that's in the Inflation Reduction Act is statutory, and that requires Congress to act, which, relying on thin Republican majorities in both houses of Congress to actually repeal any of that stuff is a fool's errand. I mean, so I'm afraid what Trump's going to be limited to is rescinding all the executive orders and putting better executive orders in place, and we're just going to continue with this imperial presidency that we've had in place for, well, really since Obama took office.
But there is one other thing that he can do. Nixon tried it, and the courts rebuffed him. But we have different courts now, and that is that he can refuse to spend money that Congress has allocated, or refuse to enforce various congressional regulations, and sequester things, and let the courts fight out, but put a stop on them right away, and watch everything come back while you're fighting it out with the statutory area.
And in the long run, by the way, that's where the repeal, the rescission of the Chevron deference is going to play a major role in restoring our country to the Republican form of government it's supposed to have, because you're not going to have this out of control bureaucracy able to do anything it wants anymore like it did for 40 years. And that's going to be a huge change.
I think the only way that we will truly get back to the way it should be is to get rid of the Fed. But anybody that has ever said get rid of the Fed has
you end up dead. So I'm not going to say that.
I'm just saying that, because if we voted in and they had to go back for balanced budgets every year, yes, things would get line itemed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No,
historically, though, there's been no nation in human history that's gone without a central bank. Not one.
Yeah.
A bank must exist to lend the government money when nobody else can or will. And all the Fed did was replace the Bank of the United States back in the 1830s, essentially. So I think getting rid of the Fed is not at all practicable. One thing that is worth noting, though, is that from 1921 to 1927, the U.S. paid off 1/3 of its national debt in about a 7-year period. Jackson paid off the entire debt in his term. So we look at 35 trillion and go, oh, what are we going to do? Oh, we'll never pay this off. It's absolutely possible. You can do it. It would have taken 20 years under Coolidge, but they could have gotten that done with a better administration than Roosevelt. So we can't look at some of these problems as insurmountable. We need to say we are going to fix them. We are going to change them. How are we going to do it now?
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, that is all I had on my agenda for today. Yes, please show that slide.
So I thank you for letting me play in your sandbox.
These are some of Larry's books. You can find them where, Larry?
wildworldofhistory.com. And remember, I've got a full curriculum for high schoolers for U.S. history and world history. The U.S. history course tracks with Patriots History of the United States. And I teach every single lesson in video. Same thing with the world history course. From 1775 to the present, teach every single lesson in video.
And you also have a site called wildworldofpolitics.com.
Yes, too, right? and there you get my political commentary Monday, Wednesday, Friday, if you're a member of the Insider. Also, I post my today's news there 5 days a week, where I cover the news of today. And we will be hosting a live election night podcast.
Oh, how fun.
Will that be live streamed on social media? Or
and I'm not sure where we're going to start it, but it will end up on Rumble and all the other stuff. That's other people's bailiwick. I just show up and read the cards.
So you can find me on Substack. You find Stu at Energy Newsbeat on Substack. And I invite everyone also just to read the most current column I have out at the Daily Caller, which gives you a history of the impacts of the Inflation Reduction Act and what it has brought to our society. And they were very generous and kind with me to exceed the normal word limit on that one because there was no way to do that one in 700 words. Stu, what
You
do
had a
you
really
got?
good column on hydrogen and the biofuels that
And the
track with
biofuels, yeah.
Irina Slav's article on the same thing. So I
Yeah.
thought her look at Europe and biofuels was pretty good.
Yeah, Irina is fantastic. I invite everyone to take a look at her Substack as well. And she's on oilprice.com too. Stu?
Hey, it's going to be a busy week, and I can't wait to see what geofencing information brings out. So
Yeah, boy. I'm actually glad I'm going to get on a plane Wednesday and fly to Europe, I think.
I hope you come back. Do not
Yeah.
use your X account while you're in the EU.
And by the way, in making our reservations, everyone, I want you to know that my wife, Terry, and I were very careful to ensure that we're not flying on any planes made by Boeing. I hate to be that way. It's an American company, but boy, have they got a
You
lot
need
of
to also make sure that you have no one that has cured cancer on the plane with you.
Yeah, no
Really?
kidding. No one related to E. Howard Hunt either.
No.
And make sure your pilot is qualified to land in like
Yeah.
Luxembourg or whatever it is.
Okay. All right. All right, guys. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks
See
for
you later.
everyone for watching. See y'all next week. Oh, no, I won't. See y'all in 3 weeks.